All right. Good evening, people of Facebook, YouTube, and otherwise. So great to be joining you here. Tonight on Speaking of Jazz, we have a wonderful guest who, oh shoot, that was my phone notifying me that we are indeed live on Facebook. Um, yeah, so like I said, we have a wonderful guest here, and as usual, I like to tell you a little bit about each guest before they come on. So tonight's guest is Paul Doc Brewer, and he's a household name in West Michigan and beyond, on and off the trombone, on and off the bandstand. And so he was most recently a professor emeritus at Aquinas College, where he was the director of instrumental music, where he taught this program for a number of years, and really built it into something special, like a little gem in Grand Rapids. Um, he holds a Doctorate of Musical Arts in Composition and Jazz Pedagogy from the famed program at the University of Northern Colorado. He holds a Bachelor's in Music Education from the University of Central Oklahoma. And looking at his career, he's been active since 1970, which is quite a cool thing. We love talking to younger musicians here, but when somebody comes on with such a wealth of experience, it's very, very exciting. So not only this, but his career's taken him to all sorts of places. Like, he's played in orchestras, in rock groups, in a wonderful jazz big band, in small groups, playing many of his own compositions, his arrangements, and many, many more. He has performed with some amazing musicians, such as, but not limited to, J.J. Johnson, Max Roach, Irby Green, Mel Torme, and the great Randy Brecker. He holds chairs, like I said, in the Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra and in the Gull Lake Jazz Orchestra. And of course, one would be remiss if one didn't mention that he performs often with his wonderful family, including Dr. Robin Connell on piano and vocals, the wonderful Benny Brewer on the bass, and of course, everybody knows his son, Matt Brewer. Surprise, also a great bass player. I could go on and on and on, but if I read to you every single one of his credentials, we would just be here for a really long time. And I want you all to get to know this gentleman who we have honored at WMJS as the 2021 Musician of the Year. Please welcome Paul Doc Brewer. Hey, Doc, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Jordan.
You know what? I'm doing well now that you're here on this program. Can't wait to talk about all things music and life and all sorts of great stuff here.
Well, I'm ready whenever you are.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, let's just start with I mean, you've been playing music for a long time, so how did you get started and why the trombone?
Well, it's really interesting the way that came about. It all traces back to my father, L.E. Brewer Jr., who passed away he was 92. He passed away on May 21st of 2020. And he had lived a long and very productive life. And it was probably one of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life. But he was a great athlete. He had been what was called a tailback back in the day, which would be a running back now. And he set all kinds of scoring records. And he was a pretty boy. He was sort of a white Muhammad Ali. He was pretty, and everybody knew it. And he was balletic and just a charming fellow. And he played trombone. So his philosophy of life was, the way he put it, was ASA, artist, scholar, athlete. He thought that a man or a woman, but particularly for just in my case, to be to have some degree of discernible ability. It didn't have to be world class or anything in all three areas: athletic, scholastically, and artistically. And so he aspired to do that kind of thing. And of course, a heavy emphasis on his athleticism. But he did play trombone for a while. He was a great dancer. He loved the arts and scholarship too. So that was, and my mother was very literate and well-read. And so our house was sort of an oasis for the arts and culture. And so my father, when I was 9 years old, played a recording of one of my great heroes on the trombone, Tyree Glenn, who was with Duke Ellington. He was also with Louis Armstrong. And I've been around long enough. I'm 70, so I can reveal that in 1967, in January, I heard Louis Armstrong's All-Stars live in performance in Oklahoma City. And of course, Tyree was playing trombone in that. And I was just enchanted with the whole thing. So, but after, because my father played those recordings for me, and I became enthralled and enchanted with the trombone because Tyree's sound was just, and his style was so beautiful, it just immediately appealed to me, even at 9 years old. I started to play the trombone at 11 years old. My father taught me the positions, and I just began to play by ear. I didn't know the names of the notes I was playing at that point. And he gave me his Tommy Dorsey records. So my two models for sound from age 9 to 11 were two of the greatest trombone players for sound who have ever played, Tyree Glenn and Tommy Dorsey. So I had a great foundation for all of that. Now, I did this for a year by ear. I had no inkling of what keys or notes or anything were. I just knew the positions, and I would pick up things off the recordings. So I had worked up Tommy Dorsey's Sentimental Over You. I had a high C sharp when I was 12 years old. I didn't know that that's the note I was playing, but that I could do it. So the first day of band, and when I was 12 years old at Del City Elementary in Oklahoma, in Del City, Oklahoma, I met the band director. His name was J.B. Rounds, and he was an older man. And he complimented me. He said, "You have a very pretty sound." So and he made note of that. So after the first rehearsal, I'm 12, right? We walked outside this old barracks band room that they had back then. And I asked him, I said, "Mr. Rounds, have you ever heard of Tommy Dorsey?" And he said, "Well, yes, in 1935, I played tenor saxophone in his band." And of course, at that point, I thought I was looking at a god, because here was a man, my first band director, who had been in the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, had written arrangements for him. He's on the original recording of Sentimental Over You. So I couldn't have had a better beginning. I had him for 3 years. After that, he gave me my first music theory lessons. He gave me my first arranging lessons. And so I was at the very beginning, because of my father and because of Mr. Rounds and all those connections. I was extremely lucky to have entered the world of the trombone, the jazz trombone, in the way that I did. It would be years later before I ever understood fully how lucky I had actually been in that regard. So that's how I started.
That's an incredible story.
That's
just a great
story. I think back on that, and it still sounds incredible to me. I thought, man, I rolled sevens on the dice over and over on that one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. To be born into the family.
Yes.
Where your father was just so like, mm-hmm. All right, let's do this scholar, athlete, artist,
right? Mm-hmm.
Persona, and to be played those records.
Yeah.
And then to have the band director that you had, that's some pretty.
Yeah. Yeah. If you look in some of the old big band anthologies and books that like the George T. Simon and people like that have put together, you can see there's Mr. Rounds right there in the 1935 band. He's sitting next to Bud Freeman. I'm sure you probably know. Yes, he's right there. His nickname in that band was Clyde Rounds, but he went by Chick Rounds later on. But it was Mr. Rounds always to me.
Uh-huh. Very interesting. So, yeah, and I think about, this whole life that you've had
Mhm.
musically, and how it's very interesting, your persona, because yeah, you've got a heavy investment as a scholar,
Uh,
you've got an investment as an athlete,
right.
and in your love of fitness and weightlifting, and
Mhm.
then of course, as a musician, I
Right.
think that part kind of speaks for itself. But it I can see where that all really comes from your father.
They did.
Um, yeah, and so does it, when you I'm wondering if your choice of profession, because some of these kids growing up, their parents are maybe not so keen on them being
Yeah.
musicians, and I'm wondering if your like, what was your father's profession, and then how was what were his thoughts on your choice of profession?
Both of my parents were supportive all along the way. There was never any doubt about it. I think because of his philosophy of the three things I mentioned, uh, and he also included something else, ARC, the arc of your life, accountability, responsibility, credibility. That was all part of it too. Because he had inculcated that concept in my mind, that neither of my parents had any worries about me at all regarding what track I might want to take. When they knew I wanted to be a musician, they weren't worried at all that I would succeed, because they had, what is the old expression, primed the pump, so to speak, and provided the orientation and the concepts that would guide me toward effecting all of that in a productive way. They knew I would take it seriously, which I did, and so there was never any doubt. They were extremely supportive. My mother, in particular, was what I got from her. I talked about the three things: artist, scholar, athlete. Scholastically, so much of that came from her, because she was Emma Lou. That was my mother's name. Uh, her father had been the superintendent of Oklahoma schools back in I think the 1940s, 30s and 40s for a while, Otto Edward Shaw. And he was very much like, if you've ever seen the film To Kill a Mockingbird, Gregory Peck's portrayal of Atticus Finch. My maternal grandfather was very much like him. And so and quite the brilliant man. Scott died far too soon. He was 57. I was only 6 years old when he died, but I do remember him. And so all the focus on scholasticism and literature, because I often wondered, sometimes I joke that my mother must have read every line of print in existence, because she was so always reading. In fact, she taught me to read before I went to first grade. There was no kindergarten where we lived in Carlsbad, New Mexico at the time. So she taught me to read, and I can't remember a time when she wasn't reading to me. My earliest memories are of my mother reading to me constantly, and so when I got to first grade, I was so lucky to have a great first grade teacher, Mrs. Ferris, an extremely creative person, and I was reading on a third grade level already at that point, and so Miss Ferris gave me extra things to read, which advanced my reading even further, and that was all due to my mother. That came from there. So I think between the two of my parents in all those areas, they weren't worried about me at all when it came to pursuing music. They knew that I had the wherewithal in all of those areas, was scholastically and artistically, and the perseverance that you get from athleticism to do what I wanted to do. Now, when you ask about the experiences I've had with other people, and when I was at Aquinas College, and training band directors, and some of whom are out there now doing very well, I ran into several times students whose parents were not supportive. They were worried, and it wasn't because they were bad people. It had nothing to do with that. They were just worried about a life in music and how tenuous that can be. There was one of my students. Haley Stoner is her name. Now she's has done a lot of great stuff at in Kentwood schools and other places. When she first came to me, I said, this kid's a band director. I knew it right away. You can tell, when they're like that. And she said, well, I'm going to major in biology. And I was thinking inwardly, no, you're not going to do that. You'll be back. You'll be back. And one semester later she was. And then because you can tell as an educator, and you've had enough experience in this realm already to know when they walk in the door. Some of those kids walk in and it's just you can tell they're just born band directors. Kelly Smith, down at Wayland, who was one of my students.
Yes. Yeah, Kelly's great.
When she walked in the door, I knew. I said, this. Of course, there was never any doubt with her. She she didn't have what I had. That very few of them do. Very few kids come in. Students. Everybody's a kid to me now. But eventually, the parents come around when they realize, that their daughter or son is really dedicated to this sort of cause. So I run into that, and I've seen it over and over. And because of what I had and my experiences over the years of dealing with students who didn't have that, I was able to deal with it well enough to help them to make it through.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think, certainly an advantage to you as somebody working in collegiate level education, as a person who was able to be that for your students.
Sure.
Yeah, that asset that you had growing up that they might not have had, but would eventually have.
Yes.
Certainly a great asset.
Yeah, I think it was. And I mean, I have to give that credit to my parents for that. It provided a kind of clarity about what was needed in order for these other students to be able to attain what I had attained because of all the support I had. It was like I could fill in the blanks for them over time or help them. And with their parents too, then I understand why the parents felt that way. It's, I mean, you would know well too about any musician who's gone through what you and I have gone through and other educators. You have to take it seriously. And there's no guarantee that at the end of it, that it's going to work out for you the way you want it to. But because you know that, because you're mindful of that to an intense degree, then you do what it takes to get there. And so do the students who have come through the track that I tried to provide for them.
Absolutely. So with regard to something, Doc, that I really appreciate about you is that you have never been one to kind of play into genre-based favoritism.
Nope.
Like when I talk to you, you are as enthusiastic about JJ and Kai as you are about Stravinsky, as you are about, fill in the blank.
Sure.
And I'm wondering how that has kind of fueled your career as both an artist and a teacher. Well,
it's the reason I got hired at Aquinas College, back in 1999. I was almost 48 years old at that point. And Roger Durham, one of my colleagues there, who was a trumpet player, but he's also the head of the political science department there, told me many years later, he said, the reason we hired you is because of you were an eclectic, your broad-based experience, and you were close to 48, and we were pretty sure you wouldn't leave. So, and they were great to me there at Aquinas. So I had no desire to leave after that. But I taught a class called the History of Popular Music, for 20 years there. I was at Aquinas for 20. I was at the University of Southern Colorado for 8 before that, but Aquinas sort of defined everything for me as a pedagogue. But when I first walk in, you know how it is. You have your doctorate, right? You've got your doctorate. So sometimes when you walk in the room, there's students who are, 18, 19 years old, and they're looking at you, as if you're some sort of wizard because you're Dr. Van Hemert, and I'm Dr. Brewer. But I tried to put that to rest immediately. I would tell them, I said, everybody in this room will be teaching me something. about what's happening contemporarily, currently in pop music. You're already ahead of me there. I said, but what I'm going to do is to trace back through the history of popular music, which includes jazz and country music and the blues and certain aspects of classical music and characters like Leonard Bernstein, who was in every world as far as that goes, to help you understand what informs what you love right now. I'm going to show you the sources. That's what I will do. I'm not a genius. I've just been around a long time, and I've been obsessed with music for so long that naturally I would end up where I am. But you guys know things that I don't know. I'm dumber than a stump, when it comes to certain things, So let's say, I told them, I said, if you need, you can call me Dr. Brewer if you like to, but I actually prefer Doc. If you're comfortable with that, let's go with that. So with that orientation, what I was able to say was that first class was that there is a genius in every style of music, at least one genius in every style. It doesn't matter what it is. And what I completely forbid in this class is for anyone else to make fun or to look down on the music that anybody in this class might love. They all seem shocked when I would say, and it took me a while to admit it, that there are things in country music that I love. When I was very young and I was too hip for the room as a young jazz musician at North Texas State, and when I was there for a while, I would never have admitted that. But I love Hank Williams, his music, George Jones, Lefty Frizzell, all of that music appealed to me. And when I talked about that, the students would chuckle, and I'd say, okay, there's our orientation. So let's go from there. So I think that's why. I'm certain that's why I was hired at Aquinas College, because I could talk about George Russell's Lydian concept of chromatic, tonal organization, or Hank Williams, or the time that I spent with Leon Russell on the road in 1981, or when I played with the Oklahoma City Symphony in different situations, and I loved it all. There was all of the genres will produce at least somebody who's brilliant and that worth listening to, and nobody, all that too hip for the room stuff, I got rid of that, because that was encumbering to me as a musician, and it was much better to shed, that kind of excess weight that I try to get all my students to get rid of.
Oh, and a weight it is.
It is.
That is to me one of the most encumbering dispositions that I ever encounter in students, and that I encountered, in myself when I was younger.
Sure, of course.
And I think that when you shed that disposition, you can actually start living actually start playing the music. Yeah,
and you can hear more. That's one of the things I said in that class was, I said, one of the things I can teach you about the history, I can give you all these dates and people who are innovative and were extremely important. I said, but the main thing I want you to take away from here is learning how to hear more. I said, I want your ability to listen to music to move from a two-dimensional state to a three-dimensional state, so that you're hearing through layers and implications of the music. And also to understand sources. A lot of them love punk music, whether it's the Ramones or the Sex Pistols or somebody like that. So what I'll tell them, there's a video recording of the Kinks back in 1964, live recording, and I play that for them, and a lot of jaws drop open because they realize this is what informs what they're listening to. And so I tried to do that, and to show that sources inform all. There's an unbroken continuum, from the beginning, an unbroken continuum, and it's extremely important to be able to go back over it and to understand what it is that informs what you love, because there are no breaks in it anywhere along the way.
Without a doubt. I think the first time I played Sister Rosetta Tharpe, for my students in my music appreciation class, they about lost their minds.
It freaked them out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That when I first heard her too, I thought, oh, damn.
Yeah.
So this is where this comes from. Okay, I get it.
Yeah. And I think at one point she may have been quoted as saying, Well, I don't know about this rock and roll business, and of course I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact quote, but I don't know about this rock and roll business. To me, it just sounds like sped up R&B and
Right, yeah,
sped up rhythm and blues, and that's what I've been doing my whole life.
exactly. You know, I like what Little Richard said one time about R&B. He said that R&B don't stand for nothing but real black.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Of course, he was a lighthearted fellow, and he was laughing when he said that. But and he did, the other thing I liked about him, you know, because he was extremely important at the beginning of things there in rock and roll, was that he didn't put anybody down. He didn't. There was Elvis stole everything, and Pat, you know, he didn't care about that. You know, he just and when I saw him interview it, he was just glad to be there, you know, and to be a part of it all. You know.
Sometimes I wonder if in our constant yearning for more in our kind of brought on by our capitalistic society,
Sure.
that we
Yeah.
have lost part of our ability to be grateful for what it is that we have and where it is that we are.
I think it's exactly the truth there. And I can use my older son as an example of that. He's Matt, who he was just one of his most recent performances was at the Metropolitan Opera. He was the bassist in the pit orchestra, the jazz rhythm section that had Jeff Tain Watts and Matt and Adam Rogers on guitar.
Wow.
And I forget who the original pianist was supposed to be, but he got COVID and he couldn't make the gig, so they had somebody else come in. And forgive me, I can't remember his name. But Matt was, when he was 2 years old, we knew that he was a musician. You know, it was obvious that he was. He studied dance and music, and I gave him his first music theory lessons. When he was 12 years old, you know, he won the outstanding jazz soloist at the high school jazz festival. You know, for Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he played with Randy Brecker that night, and they wouldn't let him have it the next year. So, but he won it again when he was 14. Maria Schneider, you know, picked him, and his band director at that time. His mother and I were divorced, but we're great friends now. You know, we're wonderful friends, and made sure that he had a wonderful upbringing. But his band director told me there's nothing for me to give him anymore. So. My wife Robin Connell, when we were at Interlochen and Matthew was there, he started when he was 10. She ended up helping him get a scholarship so that he was at the Interlochen Arts Academy for 3 years. Then he won the Juilliard audition in 2001, and then Rodney Whitaker was his teacher at that point. And I met Rodney later, and he said he'll last about 2 years and somebody will get him. You know, and sure enough, you know, Greg Osby got him. Matt was playing in the Village Vanguard with Greg when Matt was 20. You know, so now he was a modernist. You know, Scott LaFaro and Ray Brown, and those were his influences. But there was a point at which Matt must have been, I don't know, 24, 25 years old. He's 38 now. When all of a sudden, just because we would talk from time to time, he said, Dad, I said, I've started to explore the historical continuum. He said, I've gone way back in time to find out where did all this come from. You know, so then he went back to the earliest sources, you know, up through the turning point, Jimmy Blanton, you know, with Duke Ellington, you know, where things really started to flip. But there would be no Scott LaFaro without Jimmy Blanton. You know, and Scott always said that, you know, so he was going one by one up through the continuum to try to understand where all this came from and how he ended up doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
You know? So that I felt so good about that when he was exploring all of that, and he's imparted that to his students. And one of the funniest things was, you know, Matt is recorded with I've lost track of how he's got 3 of his own recordings.
Yeah, me too.
I've lost track. He's been on so many things, but he said, Dad, he said, not all that long. He said, one of my students came in and he transcribed one of my solos. And, you know, he said, Dad, he played it better than I did. So I was laughing about that. And I said, well, yeah, I said, look out, here they come, you know. So, but all of that came to fruition in the way it did because of Matt's exploration back through the continuum to get to where he is now. So and that's a protracted answer to your question, but that is how profoundly important all of that is.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And what a great, you know, what a great case study.
Yeah.
You know,
It's a great way to put it. I'm going to remember what you just said.
Yeah, definitely. I think to me, a lot of where the music comes from,
Mm-hmm.
you just see young kids all the time, and again, I was one of them.
Oh yeah.
So
We all were.
yeah. So I heard Bird, and it was over. But then when I was in my first college years, I was obsessed with Kenny Garrett, and frankly, I
Understandable.
still am a little bit, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
but my teacher at the time said, "Hey, why don't you learn Cannonball on what is
Yes,
this thing called love?"
I knew you were going there.
And I said, "Yeah, this is hip. This is incredible." And then I had another teacher who said, "Hey, learn this Benny Carter solo."
Yep, exactly.
And I said, "Okay." And
Buster Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, all of this just goes to show that I think we can often lose sight of the fact that we are a part of an ancestry that stretches way back, and that's so meaningful.
It is. It
It's
informs
so
your playing.
meaningful.
It makes your playing more meaningful.
Oh, it sure does.
When you become aware of that. Another example, as Matthew had gone back over the bass history continuum in jazz, he discovered all of these people, who he was unaware of. And one of those was Henry Grimes, who had played with Sonny Rollins and with people. Well, Henry disappeared for years, and Matthew was for a while just obsessed with Henry Grimes. Matt was playing in the Village Vanguard, I think, with Greg Osby. I can't remember, or maybe it might have been Terrence Blanchard. I can't remember, but he was in the Vanguard. And he said he stepped off the stand and he looked back at the bar and he recognized Henry Grimes was sitting right there. And he was just, in awe of him. And so he walked over to him and he said, "Mr. Grimes, I'm Matt Brewer. I'd like to introduce myself." And then he just told him, how much his music had meant to him. He said, "I thought Mr. Grimes was going to cry, because no one had even recognized him there, but because Matt knew who he was and had listened to all that music, he was able to connect that way." Matt had another experience like that with Charlie Hayden. Because Charlie was a big influence over Matthew, and in fact,
that makes a ton of sense.
In one of his early reviews, when Matt was in the Vanguard, when he was like 21 years old, there was a reviewer who characterized Matthew's playing as a caffeinated Charlie Hayden, so which was kind of a compliment, but okay, kid, you've got technique. And but he was playing in the Vanguard much later, and Charlie came in, sitting at the bar, and he walked up to him and he said, "Mr. Hayden, I'm so grateful. I want to tell you." And he just laid it on about, how much he appreciated him. And after he stopped, he said, "Charlie just kind of turned his head and said, 'Oh man, Matt, I'm just one of the cats.'" And they ended up having a great relationship after that. And Charlie was very supportive, for Matt. But again, it plays right into what you're talking about, being informed and appreciative of our forebears, who gave us everything. It really creates a kind of humility. I had that experience when JJ, when I was working on my doctorate, it would have been April of 1990, when I was 37 years old at the time. No, 39 actually. 91, April of 91, and I was playing lead in the big band. I was the old guy in the big band, and but when they got JJ to be the featured soloist for the jazz festival there at UNC, they sent me to take care of him, and so my dear friend Cheryl Walters, who's a great jazz trombone player, lives in Spain. We went to pick him up, we took him, and he was so unassuming, and so down to earth. But here he is. This is the greatest jazz trombonist of the modern era. This is the guy who changed the paradigm. The recordings of the eminent J.J. Johnson, 1953, 1955, he changed everything. It was the first time that classical trombonists actually looked at what was happening. you know, in large and in mass. You know, wait a minute, there's a guy who's got a sound like a classical trombonist. He articulates that way. So that everybody's aware of him. You can ask any classical trombonist, who's your favorite jazz trombone player? They almost all say J.J. Johnson. So we pick him up, right? We're with him, and I was with him 3 days. I was very, you know, helping him out as much. And I got to perform with him and all of that. But I remember telling him at one point, I said, every time I play a solo, I feel like I should write you a check for the influence you've had. And JJ said to me, he said, oh, well, you know, we all borrow from one another. And I said, yeah, but everybody in the world borrows from you. But he had a way of kind of disengaging all of that. And he was very lighthearted and kind of comical in a certain way. And so when the last time I saw him before he got into the van to leave, you know, we talked, and he left, and Cheryl and I were standing there looking, and we looked at each other, and I said, that wasn't just anybody, that was J.J. Johnson. You know, we suddenly realized whose company we had been in, but he was down to earth, and that was a great lesson. Even at 39 years old, I thought that's the way to be. You know, that's why in so many ways he's as great as he was. He's not thinking about being great. He's just playing the music. You know, everything is about the music. It's not about him. It's not about who's the greatest. It's none of that. All of that is absolutely meaningless in terms of what makes the music great. And it's a great lesson to impart to your students. You know, I've told them that so many times when I was younger. You know how it is when you compete. You know, you're wondering if you're going to measure up. You know, and hopefully nobody's going to outplay you, right? But after a while, that stuff drops away, and you realize that the music's not about that. You know, music is evocative of whatever is most meaningful to me, and let's see if I can make that happen, and let's hope that everybody else can too. It takes a long time to learn, you know, but it's again, it's the weight that drops off when that happens, you know, and it's that's what I've tried to impart to my students.
Wow, that's an absolutely beautiful sentiment. Mm-hmm. You know, I've found in a lot of different arenas in life that if you have to say over and over and over again that you're something, you're probably not that.
That's right. Yeah.
If you have to say, let's see, there are so many different examples. You know, I'm the greatest who's ever lived of such and such an occupation. I think we all know where we're going with that, but I'm, you know, I've there's never been anybody before me who's done as many things as I've done.
Right.
Yeah, you know, I just stopped believing it at some point when you have to say it so many times. And I think that your example here with JJ is a really beautiful thing. He doesn't talk about, you know, being a great musician. He just is. That's just what he does.
He just is. He just plays.
Yeah.
No, and I'll give you another example there. Now, of course, we can reference one of my great heroes of my youth was Muhammad Ali. When he did that act, I am the greatest, you know, like when he did that whole thing, you know, the George Foreman, the dirty fighter, hit Joe Frazier on top of the head, you know, all that stuff was an act. You know, that was all part of his shtick, so to speak. His daughters all confirmed that. You know, that was part of in fact, I don't know if you've been to the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville. I've been there. There's a wonder, because he was a deeply spiritual man, a devout, you know. There's a room where you can lie down on a sort of sofa-like thing, and you look up at the ceiling, and it's a circular sort of, you can read what's being spoken by a narrator. And it's beautiful what he says, but the very last thing, and it's all the words of Muhammad Ali, at the very last thing he said, in truth, I am not the greatest. The greatest is God. You know, so all of that was just part of his show. But that he and his daughter said he didn't think like that. You know, that was so I think, of course, a guy like JJ, you know, or somebody is not going to have to do any of that because it's in a different arena completely. He doesn't have to sell it in the way that Ali did. He can just be a musician, and other people can say that kind of thing. And but being around JJ for those 3 days, I got the sense unequivocally that he didn't think like that at all. He just played, and he had a wonderful appreciation for all the other musicians. Now, to segue into something else that's very important, Matt's maternal grandfather, whom he never met because he died when he was 52 years old. He had an alcohol problem. He was one of those guys, a sweetheart of a guy, who just had a problem. And I got to play with him. To this day is the best jazz trumpeter I've ever played with. Wayne Nichols. Wayne Nichols was his name. And he had played with Charlie Barnett, in the late 40s, early 50s, Woody Herman in 1957. But he came back to Oklahoma. And of course, that was to the benefit of all of us. The Wayne flugelhorn, trumpet, played piano at perfect pitch. He sang and wrote arrangements, extremely unassuming.
Yeah.
But if there was a jazz session of some kind, sit-in session, the only question is who's coming in second, because Wayne was always going to be the best without trying to be. And I learned so much from just being around him and listening to his solos. His solos, improvised solos, were so lyrical you could have written words to them. No one can outswing him, but one of the most unassuming people I've ever met. And he was one of those people who it was all about the music and nothing else, which is what I've tried to impart to my students. I've told them many times that here's what's the best thing you can do for your audience. Forget all about them. And that sounds paradoxical. It's paradoxical. I said, but here's why. If you're not thinking about them and your entire focus is on the music, they will get the best of you, which is what you want them to have. If you're worrying about what they think of you, they won't get that. So forget about them, and play. And then when you wake up and you see them and there are all those happy faces and they're applauding, you just gave them everything that you wanted to give to them because you weren't thinking about them. You were at one with the music. That took forever to learn that, and I'm sure you can identify with it, that when you've done your best, it's when you have forgotten about them.
Oh, yeah.
Then you wake up and there they are and they're happy and you gave them everything they wanted to hear.
Yeah. Well, and I think in reality, we talk so much, and especially within a jazz context, we talk so much about audiences. And, I mean, there have been musicians who have kind of put down the modern audience saying, well, they don't want jazz. They don't want what we have to say. This is not, I mean, they're uneducated. They don't understand what they want. We'll show them what they want. And, I just have to think, like, audiences, I still think they're in it for the music.
I still think a jazz audience, anybody would come to a jazz concert, is definitely like that, but you can even win over people who aren't, if they can, most of them will perceive, they'll experience, the sincerity of it all, the expressiveness of the evocativeness of it all. They'll get it. Not all of them, but surprisingly more than I think a lot of jazz musicians would expect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to let everybody know, as we're coming in our closing minutes here, feel free to comment with questions on Facebook or YouTube. We'll pick them up and we'll answer them. And I just want everybody to know that I mean, we're totally cool with that. So in the meantime, audiences. So the one of the things that I think is probably the coolest about how about the longevity of your career and how much experience you have had is that you've been able to see some pretty significant changes to not only the arena of live performance, but also composition, recording, every facet of what we do.
Right.
And I just think that there are so many people out there who, I know some of the older musicians were pretty dismissive of bop when it came on the scene. And I always get this, this vibe from you that you're here for all of it.
Yeah.
You're just like, all right, things are changing. Well, this is really cool. This is something else that I can learn about. Can you talk about, can you speak to kind of something exciting that you find about making music, whether it be in recording or composition or performance, in this day and age? I think we're so quick to say, man, this day and age really sucks. This is like just a terrible time. Why couldn't I have lived in the 60s when,
Right.
what's something that you find really positive and energizing about
San Francisco Jazz Collective right now. The Matt, my older son, is playing in that group, and if we speak about eclecticism, they run the gamut that way. That it can be as something as they can take a song by Marvin Gaye, and in fact they did recently with What's Going On, and reconceptualized it without violating its essential integrity or its original integrity, and express something out of that source that was very meaningful. A lot of jazz musicians wouldn't think that could be something to explore, but they did it brilliantly. In fact, you can find it on YouTube somewhere, or at the San Francisco Collective site. Matt actually wrote, I think, in a couple of arrangements on some things from Sly and the Family Stone, which I saw that band live, dating myself again, in 1969. And reconceived without violating the integrity of the original source, that music. So and original compositions too. So it's like that particular group, which Matt has been a part of on and off for a while, and he's back with them now, has taken the things across the continuum we're talking about and realized them with a jazz sensibility, a modern jazz or present day jazz sensibility that evokes not just what's they're experiencing now, but what's evocative of where all of that came from. So it's like you're experiencing the history of any of those pieces of music through a jazz sensibility of 2021. So that particular organization is really capturing my attention right at the moment, and I'm just so glad that Matt is involved in it. He's and the Antonio Sanchez. I've forgotten. All of a sudden, I'm screwing up here. The drummer who my old man brain is failing me here for a moment here. The drummer who did all the soundtrack for Birdman and all of that. This is what happens when you turn 70. But a lot of his music is great, and Matt has recorded with him quite a lot. Gonzalo Rubalcaba, who is Matt has recorded with frequently, who's brings Cuban, very old Cuban sources into jazz. A lot of that is happening there, but I think more than anything else, it's the San Francisco Jazz Collective.
Yeah, that's cool. That's such an exciting group, and I had heard from them. When I went through a phase. Well, I say phase, but
a phase.
I think everybody's obsessed with Miguel Zenon at some point or another, and
Sure.
what he's doing with music.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found them that way, and I've been listening to them ever since.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have this thing, Musician of the Year, and you're going to be honored on December 6th, right?
Right.
So can you just describe kind of in a few words, what, if anything, does receiving this recognition mean to you? I know it's one in a long line of things for you, but I'm just curious, as as we approach the date of the celebration, kind of what, if you had any thoughts.
I do. One is that my wife, Robin, won that award a couple of years ago. and I was there to celebrate and help out with that. And it was a wonderful party, and the celebration of her attainments in jazz, and a lot of it's sort of a family-oriented thing too. That all jazz musicians generally are, or we think of ourselves as family. And so I expect the same thing will happen on December 6th, when we have the get together. Robin will play piano, and my younger son Benny will be playing bass. Randy Marsh will be playing drums. I'll play some. My successor at Aquinas College, Tom Paulette, will be coming out, and he'll probably play a couple. We might even do a J and K thing together. I think we will on a couple of tunes. But what it means to me more than anything else is just another sweet experience in having a sort of communion with my jazz contemporaries and jazz fans, and people generally who appreciate jazz, and can have some fun with a guy who's been around a while and experienced it for decades. I think it's just I'm very happy about it, and more than anything else, it's just that I'm looking forward to that experience of playing and being with people in a communal way that was the impetus for jazz at the very beginning. It was a communal and a two-way street, so to speak, between audience and the players, and with no separation at all. It was we're all in a big family. We're all having this experience together, and there are no dividing lines or barriers between any of us. So I think more than anything, it's that.
Wow, that's outstanding. And you mentioned that that Robin and Benny and Randy will all be playing, who are in in a lot of ways, literally and figuratively, your family. You've been playing with all of them for a number of years, so that'll be really wonderful.
Randy and I are the same age. Robin just turned 65 recently. Benny is 22. So we're going across the generations there. But with Randy, I had played with his father, Arno, back in Oklahoma. He was there for a while before I ever met Randy, So we, in fact, we'd played together for a while before we figured out that connection. And so when I played, Arno and Randy and I played together, and Robin. So we've come full circle, so to speak, and in a really familial way, I think.
Yeah, that's so cool. So we got Michelle in here, and she's saying that she's really looking forward to honoring you, president of the West Michigan Jazz Society.
Yes, she's a dear. She's a sweetheart. I just love Michelle.
Yeah, terrific human being. And she says we're looking forward to hearing some fantastic music.
We'll do our best to produce that.
So, you're now retired from full-time college teaching.
Right.
Certainly not retired from performing. You're keeping that up quite well, and you've done a lot of writing and a lot of other things. What's next for you? Is there anything you're working on the horizon that you're kind of excited about, or anything that you kind of want to mention that you're?
I do. I've been working with a salsa band, Grupo Aye. And I've begun to write for that band, and I've composed a couple of originals for that group, and we had a rehearsal. In fact, we're going to be playing at the Kroc Center on Division and near 28th Street there on next Saturday. It's with the Grand Rapids Symphony Orchestra. They'll be with us too, so it'll be the salsa band and the orchestra, and we'll be doing some Christmas music and some other things. So I've always loved salsa music, and it's a great opportunity to be able to write and play. And the trombone is a wildly popular instrument in salsa music, so I feel right at home with that. And and the Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra, we're still rehearsing. I'm still writing for that group, and I think more than anything else, I'm looking forward to and working toward more composing and arranging. So that's because the embouchure at this age takes a lot longer to warm up, and to sustain. So, but writing you can do till the end of time, which is what JJ did,
And JJ and Sammy Nestico and so many others.
so many others. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Very cool. Yeah, the writing. And you know what? I mean, writing takes so much time and
It does,
so much creative energy. And when
Right.
you're, running a program like you were at Aquinas full time, and you're, pouring your heart and soul into your students, you don't always have time and creative energy to do a
No.
lot of writing.
No, the writing I did do was for the jazz band, and it was generally when it was in a smaller version, a little big band like six horns, and so
Yep.
I was able to do some then. But you know how it is with a big band when you've got 16,
sure.
17 pieces, it takes a lot more work to do that.
Oh, it sure does. Got to make sure that everything is in the right place and nobody's getting in the way of anybody else. And that is way harder than I'm making it sound right now.
Yes, it is. It is. No, just anybody who's done any kind of writing like that knows exactly what you're talking about. You spend a lot of time alone, trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. It can be quite an isolated experience.
Yeah. The essayists and writers and novelists, it's like Fran Lebowitz one time was on David Letterman, and he said, "Do you like writing?" She said, "No, I hate it." And he said, "What?" She said, "I like having written." So I think anybody who has written a big band chart feels like that. You like it when it's over with, by having done it,
Without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in the midst of this pandemic, and I know a lot of people would really love to consider the pandemic over, much like I would, but I mean, we're just not even.
No, we're still there. Fourth surge.
We're still there.
Mm-hmm.
I am wondering, the pandemic has changed so much about the way that we do things, the way that we do,
Mm-hmm.
live our lives as artists and as educators. I'm wondering, what further impact do you see the pandemic having on music and on musicians, if we are, so blind as to not really get our acts together?
Well, if we're in a fourth surge in Michigan right now. I've just heard one of the doctors from Spectrum Health was talking about that today, that the ICUs and the hospitals around Michigan are at the breaking point when it comes to being able to help everybody, and that beyond just people with COVID. This has to be straightened out. People have to take this a lot more seriously. Robin and Benny and I caught COVID before we were doing our best to try to avoid it. But I think somebody gave it to Robin, which might even have been a health worker when she was at the dentist or some other place. So we all recovered from it. And but it was terrible trying to get through it. I didn't have respiratory problems, but the fatigue that I had lasted forever and ever. And it took a long time to get out of there. So by the time all of us recovered and the vaccine came out, we all got it. I had the 2 shots. I had the booster recently. So I think we have to take this seriously and try to get across to people that the science about this is real, and all of the pseudoscience and all the conspiracy theories and all of that is bunk. We've got to be able to get our citizens inoculated enough so that we finally flatten the curve and get out of this thing. Until then, it's going to impact us negatively, and not just musical in musical venues and live performance, but in so many other ways. Interestingly, though, musicians are creative and come up with ways to play anyway. The Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra, the album, our most recent album, Behind the Mask, was about, we recorded our parts. I recorded my part right here for the most part, except for a couple of solos I played above, and we integrated all of that. Eddie Eicher and some other people and Bob Nixon put all that together. I was astonished at what that end product sounded like. It's like the big band is right there. So we'll do that. When we as musicians will find ways to keep being creative and to keep playing. But it would really be helpful if society at large embraced the science that we have, so that we can, as a collective, work together to get past this thing. That's what it's going to take, I think.
Absolutely. And speaking of Behind the Mask, mm-hmm. I'm putting the link in the comments. Everybody can go and purchase that. It's available on the streaming sites as well. But you know what?
Mm.
You know you want to go buy it.
That's right.
It's not that expensive, and
Oh,
purchasing music has such a significant impact,
it does.
far more than like one record sale compares to, I don't know, something like 250,000 streams or something.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And so we need to be, if you like live music and you want it to come back in full force and full swing, not having to worry about anything, go support musicians, because music doesn't happen, as stupid as it may sound, without musicians.
That's right.
And
Funny that we have to emphasize that, but that is the case, right?
but everybody's got to eat. So go purchase that record. It's a great one. I purchased my copy and did not regret it. It was fun listening to so many friends play compositions that they had wrote and others had wrote at such a high level. And again, I forgot I was listening to something recorded completely in isolation. That was
right.
fun.
One of my compositions is on there. One of Robin's too, and
Yeah.
It's an unusual one for me. The influence for me as a composer has always been Wayne Shorter. But I had that. But I dedicated one to Bob Nixon that I called Bob the Bopper.
The Bopper, yeah.
It is. I've never written anything like that, and it was a lot of fun. And I was thinking of the cartoon characters, Rocky and Bullwinkle, and all the stuff that he loves. And so that alone was one of the high points for me in that recording, was that I was able to do something like that, which I hadn't before, in dedication to a really great friend and leader of the Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra, Bob Nixon.
Yeah, and of course you can't forget Robin's composition, the Wiggle Worm.
Wiggle Worm, yeah.
Wonderful composition.
Wonderful piece of music. And I remember when she wrote it, it was had to do with when Benny was a little boy, and had to do with a book, a nursery rhyme book of some kind, but that it was all centered on him. Yeah. And so you can tell that it's programmatic in a way, and a lot of fun to play. I had a ball playing that tune.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to do a couple things here. First of all, this is a link to Robin's website. Check her out. She's a fantastic musician, and she's one of the musicians you'll be hearing at the Musician of the Year banquet.
Right.
And then, we also spoke about Matt Brewer, wonderful bass player who may be, who knows, but definitely is related to present company.
Right.
So go check out Matt's music as well. And actually, frankly, you may have heard him and you probably don't even know it, because I think so many bass players go incognito.
Yeah, especially Matt. Antonio Sanchez, it was he's recorded with mostly. That's sort of been his main gig. Yeah. And but even there, he's on the Meridian Suites, which is a great piece of music. And I saw that group play it live in Portland and in Chicago. And but no, Matt is he's the right hand man. He's there to help you.
Yeah,
it's always been his orientation. So it's if you explore and find him on things, he never tries to promote himself. So he's finally gotten somebody to help book him. So he's someone else will be promoting him. But he was never that way. He was always like, I'm here to play, and whatever it is you need, I got it.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Again, thank you, Doc, so much
My pleasure.
for being here. And then this is the WMJS celebration, Musician of the Year. This is the link. It's in the comments. Michelle put it there. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
But Doc, thanks so much for your time and for your wisdom. You keep cracking jokes about being old and everything. And look, man, all I have to say is that people who are my age and younger have so much to learn, from a generation that has been doing this and has been living this life much longer than we have. You know, it's the reason that I, you know, made a point to hire a certain older musician on my next record.
Excellent.
Yeah, and Rodney. And
Yeah.
I made a point because we have so much to learn. And there's so much that I have to learn, and there's so much that, you know, that we all have to learn, and there are sources who are ready and willing to pass that knowledge down. And Doc, I absolutely think that you're one of those people. So I would encourage, if you have a chance to hear this guy, go hear him, but then go talk to him after the set and say, hey, you know, Doc, you're
sure.
You know,
I'm easily approachable.
Absolutely.
I'm just an ordinary guy. Just come up and talk to me.
Absolutely. So, you know, it's been an absolute pleasure. And once again, thank you, Paul Brewer, Musician of the Year. And we will really look forward to celebrating you on December the 6th.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.